I want to share with you something that happened to my family yesterday. On Purim, I tried to go visit the Gedolim, and this year I was zeichet to see Rav David Koyen and Rav Safrani and Rabbi Sternbach, amongst others. And it happened to be that right after we had Koilo, Purim morning, I went, we were right near Sanhedrin Mechavet, we were in Sanhedrin Mechavet. I went to see Rav Asher Ari Eli. Now, Rav Asher Eli, I always tell people, there are two types of people in the world. The people who met Rav Asher Eli and the people who did not meet Rav Asher Eli. Right? If you ever learned in the Sefer Oracle Sadikim, Shar Ha'anava, and you can learn that Shar for a week, a month, a year. You can learn it for 50 years. And I'm sure if you learn Shar Ha'anava for 50 years, and there's also a book by Rav Toledano, book Amidos, Ala Navim Titin Chen, I think it's called. Those books will certainly help you. And you'll certainly grow by seeing what Chazal say about the attribute of humility. But I always tell people, if you haven't met Rav Asher Eli, then you haven't really gotten to first base yet, because you don't understand what the word humility means until you've had an encounter with Rav Asher Ari Eli, right? And if just whoever doesn't know about Rav Asher Eli, he gives the biggest shir in the mirror. There are about 1,000 people there. Each one has their designated seat, right? There's about another 1,000 people listening to it by broadcast, and I think it's also on Kol Halusha, and it's on other channels as well. And as one Chashuva Balabas in Far Rockaway told me, he says, I don't believe there's any Maggid shir in the world who gives shir before he listens to what Rav Asher had to say. In fact, most of the Talmidim today, in the Mir giving shir, are Talmidim of Rav Asher Ari Eli. So it happens, I try every year on Purim to get to Rav Asher Ari Eli. So this year, as I was going toward this house, driving up, my close friend who was taking me, Rabbi Jonathan Karp, so he said, look, it looks like Rav Asher is walking the street. And he was right. I got out. And I had a copy of my book, Yedidia, with me in Hebrew. And I said, I'd like to give this book to the Rav and the Rebbitzin, because the Rebbitzin teaches in one of the girl seminaries, B'nai Sarah, and perhaps she could, encourage other her students to read this. And Rav Asher apologized to me, said, we're traveling now, we're going to my one of my children for the Suda, and therefore we're not able to take the book. Okay, and that was the end of that. I was happy, at least I got to see Rav Asher in his face and hear a few words from him, and I closed the story at that. Yesterday was, shortly after Purim. My wife, about 2 o'clock, gets a phone call. I wasn't at home. She told me the story. She picks up the phone and she says, "Oh, this is Asher Ari Eli." He says, "I just want to apologize profusely that I didn't take your husband's book. I was walking with my wife, but I got so much chizuk from his first sefer, Mizmor Soda. I really would like if I could get a copy of his book, Yedidia, for us to have." And of course, we're talking about now the biggest Marbitz Torah in the entire world, right? Who has, thousands and thousands and thousands of Talmidim. And he takes the time to call me up because he feels bad that on Purim he didn't take the book that I was giving him. He mentioned also my first Sefer Mizmor Soda, which I was Zocha to put out, and I was Zocha to print something in Halacha from Rosh Eli, which was the first time he'd ever printed something. It was a big schus for me to get that in my Sefer that I printed after my accident about thanking Hashem. After that Sefer came out, a few days later, I got him a copy. He calls me up. He says, "This is Asher Areli. I want to thank you profusely for including me in your Sefer. It was such an honor for me." Right now, the thing is like this: he's not faking it. Like he really feels humility and honor from little me putting me in my Sefer. Number one, and number two, like he feels really bad that that he gave me. I tried to give him my safer, and that he wouldn't take it. It's the real thing. It's not a fake out over here. So Lamaisa, we really have to take something from this. Is that number one? If you have a chance to meet Rav Asher Eli, I would tell people like this: if you're currently living in New Zealand, or let's say in Alaska or Hawaii, or like I don't know where. If you have to travel 24 hours in a plane um, or more to come see Rav Asher Eli, it's worth it. Your whole life will change around. You'll see what the word humility means. Now, I always wondered this. I said, like, how did he get there? Like, how did this happen? How is it possible that a person is so great and yet so humble? And then I realized, what a silly question. Moshe Rabbeinu was the Anav Mikol Adam. He was the most humble person who ever lived. And as I've said many times, from Chaim Volozhin says, he writes in the back of Nefesh Chaim in his notes at the end, it says that if we had the level, and I apologize for the wind here, I'm outside in the coastal, it's really windy and cold coming out here because I feel this is where the share must be given. But Chaim Volozhin writes that if we had the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu, we would have the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu. The level of Torah that a person has is according to his humility. The more a person humbles himself, the more Torah that a person has. And this is why Rav Asher is so great. Of course, he's a genius and he's a masmid, but it's because of his great humility. And the truth is, the greater you get, the more humble you should get, because you come closer to Hashem and you recognize His greatness and you see how small you really are. I was talking to a young man yesterday from Or Sameach, and he said, "What's the point of learning Torah? The more we know, the more we don't know, right? The more we realize we don't know." And he said, "That is the point. The point of learning Torah is to humble ourselves more and more to Hashem and recognize that He is the source of everything. He's the source of all blessing, and He is the source of all good, and He's the source of all knowledge. And the closer we come to that recognition, the bigger we are." So let's all take this to heart. If you haven't met Rav Asher yet, make every effort to do it. If you're a man, try to meet him. If you're a woman, try to see him, right? Try to see him. If you could somehow see a shir of his or listen to a shir of his, listen to it, even if you don't understand one word. But just to see, get his picture, put it up in your house. Just to see such an individual is a life-changing experience. We should all learn from this. We should all be affected by it. And Bezrat Hashem, we should have siyata d'shmaya to come to the greatest levels of humility and to recognize our true relationship with Hashem. Amen. Kain Torah.